The spring flooding of 1904 in the Missouri River Valley had been the worst in living memory, washing away bridges, destroying crops, and forcing rancher Jerry Stockton to make extensive repairs to the foundation of his main barn at the Whispering Pines Ranch. But as he worked to shore up the damaged supports beneath the century-old structure, Jerry discovered something that would transform his understanding of his property's history and reveal secrets that had been hidden beneath his feet for generations. Jerry operated the Whispering Pines Ranch on 3,000 acres of fertile bottomland along the Missouri River, about 20 miles west of Jefferson City, where his family had been raising cattle and crops for 4 generations. Since his great-grandfather had purchased the land from the territorial government in 1821 and established what would become one of the most successful and respected agricultural operations in central Missouri, at 42, Jerry represented the 4th generation of Stocktons to work the same land, inheriting not only the property and livestock, but also the responsibility of maintaining family traditions of hard work, community service, and stewardship of the rich farmland that had supported his ancestors through wars, economic downturns, and the countless challenges that had characterized frontier life in Missouri. During the turbulent decades of territorial development and early statehood, the barn that Jerry was repairing had been built by his great-grandfather in 1823, constructed with massive oak timbers and stone foundations that had withstood decades of Missouri, whether while serving as the center of operations for the ranch's cattle and horse breeding programs that had supplied livestock to settlers throughout the developing territories of the American West. The flood damage that had necessitated Jerry's repairs was the most serious structural problem the barn had experienced since its construction, requiring him to excavate around the foundation stones and replace support timbers that had been weakened by the unprecedented water levels that had inundated the Missouri River Valley for 3 weeks during the spring runoff that had overwhelmed all the normal channels and drainage systems. But as Jerry worked to clear debris and mud from beneath the barn's northeastern corner, his shovel struck something that was clearly not part of the original foundation, a wooden structure that appeared to be deliberately constructed and carefully concealed beneath layers of stone and soil that had accumulated over many decades of use and weathering. "What the hell is this?" Jerry muttered as he carefully cleared dirt away from what appeared to be a wooden door or panel that had been fitted with heavy iron hinges and a substantial lock that showed signs of age but remained intact despite its long burial beneath the barn floor. The discovery of what was obviously a trapdoor beneath his family's barn raised immediate questions about who had constructed it, when it had been built, and what purpose it had been designed to serve during the early years of the ranch's operation, when Missouri was still a frontier territory where settlers faced numerous challenges that might have required hidden storage or concealment facilities. The initial assumption was that the trapdoor led to a root cellar or storage area that had been constructed by his great-grandfather as a means of preserving food or protecting valuable supplies during the uncertain times that had characterized Missouri's territorial period and early statehood, when families needed to be prepared for various emergencies and hardships that could threaten their survival. But the construction and location of the trapdoor suggested purposes that went beyond simple food storage, as the entrance was positioned in an area of the barn that would have been difficult to access during normal operations, and was concealed in ways that indicated deliberate efforts to hide its existence from casual observation by visitors or workers who might not be trusted with knowledge of its location. "Martha," Jerry said to his wife when he returned to the ranch house that evening, "I found something strange under the barn today. There's a trapdoor that's been hidden there for decades, maybe since the barn was built. I think my great-grandfather constructed some kind of secret room or storage area that we never knew about." Martha Stockton had lived at the Whispering Pines Ranch for 18 years since her marriage to Jerry, and she had heard numerous family stories about the early days of the ranch and the challenges that the first generation of Stocktons had faced while establishing their operation in the Missouri wilderness during the dangerous and uncertain period when the territory was developing its political and social institutions. "Jerry," Martha replied, "your great-grandfather lived through some dangerous times when Missouri was still a territory. There were conflicts with Native American tribes, problems with outlaws and bandits, and political tensions that led to violence throughout the region. Maybe he built that room as a place to hide during emergencies or to protect valuable items from thieves and raiders." The family history that Martha referenced included stories about Jerry's great-grandfather, Ezekiel Stockton, who had been known throughout the region as a man of strong principles and unwavering courage, who had served as a leader in the territorial government while also establishing one of the most successful ranches in central Missouri through hard work, innovation, and careful management of both land and livestock. But some of the family stories also included references to activities and associations that had never been fully explained, including Ezekiel's involvement with various political and social causes that had apparently required discretion and secrecy during the turbulent period when Missouri was developing its identity as a state and dealing with the complex issues surrounding slavery and territorial expansion. The decision to open the trapdoor and investigate what lay beneath the barn required Jerry to consider both his curiosity about his family's history and the possibility that whatever he discovered might reveal information that could be significant beyond simple historical interest, potentially affecting his understanding of his ancestors and their role in Missouri's development. "Martha," Jerry said, as he prepared to return to the barn with tools that would allow him to open the locked trapdoor, "I need to know what's down there. If my great-grandfather went to the trouble of building and hiding this room, there must have been a good reason, and I think we owe it to his memory to understand what he was trying to protect or preserve." The lock that secured the trapdoor was substantial and well-made, designed to prevent unauthorized access while also protecting whatever was stored beneath the barn from moisture, rodents, and other threats that could damage valuable materials over extended periods of time in the challenging environment of a Missouri basement. But the lock mechanism had been affected by decades of moisture and temperature changes, making it difficult to operate even with the proper key, which Jerry hoped to find among the collection of old keys and hardware that had been preserved in various storage areas throughout the ranch buildings over the years since Ezekiel's death. After 2 hours of careful work with various keys and lock-picking tools, Jerry finally managed to open the trapdoor, revealing a wooden ladder that descended into darkness and what appeared to be a substantial underground chamber that had been carved out of the earth beneath the barn's foundation and carefully reinforced to prevent collapse. "Martha, bring the lanterns," Jerry called as he prepared to descend into the hidden room that his great-grandfather had constructed and concealed more than 8 years earlier. "We're going to find out what Ezekiel Stockton thought was important enough to hide beneath our barn." Chapter 2. The Underground Chamber. The descent into the hidden chamber beneath the Whispering Pines ranch barn revealed a carefully constructed underground room that demonstrated both the engineering skills of Jerry Stockton's great-grandfather and the serious purposes for which the concealed space had been designed during the turbulent early years of Missouri's territorial development, when political tensions and social conflicts made secrecy a matter of survival. The chamber was approximately 12 feet long, 8 feet wide, and 6 feet high, with walls that had been lined with stone and timber to prevent collapse and provide protection from moisture that could damage whatever materials were intended to be stored in the underground facility during extended periods of concealment. "Jerry, this is incredible," Martha said as she held the lantern, while Jerry examined the construction details of the hidden room. "Your great-grandfather built this to last. Look at the craftsmanship in these stone walls and timber supports. This wasn't just a simple hiding place. This was engineered to serve as a permanent facility." The ventilation system that Ezekiel Stockton had incorporated into the chamber's design included carefully concealed air shafts that provided circulation while maintaining the secrecy of the underground room, demonstrating both engineering expertise and understanding of the requirements for preserving materials and potentially sheltering people during extended periods of concealment. The lighting system consisted of oil lamp holders and candle sconces that had been built into the walls, along with reflective surfaces that maximized the illumination, while minimizing the amount of fuel required to maintain adequate visibility for people working in the underground space during nighttime operations. But it was the contents of the chamber that truly revealed the purposes for which Ezekiel had constructed the hidden facility, as the underground room contained materials and equipment that suggested activities far more significant and dangerous than simple food storage or protection of valuable family possessions from thieves or natural disasters. The chamber contained dozens of wooden crates and boxes that were labeled with codes and symbols rather than clear descriptions of their contents, along with weapons, ammunition, and supplies that indicated preparation for armed conflict or resistance, activities that would have required secrecy and careful organization to avoid detection by hostile authorities. "Martha, these aren't just family keepsakes," Jerry said as he examined the contents of the first crate he opened, which contained rifles, pistols, and ammunition that appeared to be in excellent condition despite their age. "This looks like an arsenal that was designed to arm a small army or support some kind of organized resistance movement." The weapons cache included not only firearms but also medical supplies, communication equipment, and maps that appeared to detail routes and locations throughout Missouri and the surrounding territories, suggesting that the underground chamber had served as a headquarters or supply depot for operations that extended far beyond the boundaries of the Stockton Ranch. The medical supplies were particularly intriguing, as they included not only basic first aid materials, but also more sophisticated surgical instruments and medications that would have been expensive and difficult to obtain during the territorial period, suggesting that the chamber had been prepared to treat serious injuries that might result from dangerous activities. But perhaps most intriguing were the documents that Jerry and Martha discovered in waterproof containers that had preserved papers, letters, and records that revealed the true nature of Ezekiel Stockton's activities. During the 1820s and 1830s, when Missouri was struggling with the political and social tensions that would eventually contribute to the conflicts that preceded the Civil War. "Jerry, look at this," Martha said as she carefully unfolded a letter that was addressed to Ezekiel Stockton and signed by someone whose name she recognized from Missouri history books. "This is correspondence from some of the most important political figures in territorial Missouri. Your great-grandfather was involved in things that were much more significant than we ever imagined." The letters revealed that Ezekiel Stockton had been involved in what appeared to be an organized network of people who were working to prevent the expansion of slavery into Missouri and other Western territories, operating in secrecy because their activities were considered treasonous by pro-slavery forces that controlled much of the territorial government and had the power to arrest and prosecute anyone who opposed their interests. The Underground Railroad references in the documents indicated that the Whispering Pines Ranch had served as a station on the network of safe houses and transportation routes that helped enslaved people escape to freedom in northern states and Canada, with the hidden chamber serving as a supply depot and communication center for these operations. "Martha, my great-grandfather, was helping runaway slaves," Jerry said as he read through documents that detailed the assistance provided to hundreds of freedom seekers who had passed through the ranch during the decades when the Underground Railroad was operating throughout Missouri and other border states that were contested territories in the struggle over slavery expansion. The records that Ezekiel had maintained included detailed accounts of the people who had been helped, the routes they had traveled, and the network of allies throughout Missouri who had risked their lives and property to assist in the operations that violated both territorial and federal laws regarding slavery and the return of escaped enslaved people to their owners. The financial ledgers revealed that Ezekiel had invested substantial portions of his ranch income in supporting Underground Railroad operations, purchasing supplies, paying for transportation, and providing financial assistance to freedom seekers who needed resources to establish new lives in free states and territories where they could live without fear of recapture. But the documents also revealed that Ezekiel's activities had attracted the attention of slave hunters, federal marshals, and pro-slavery vigilantes who had threatened the ranch and its operations, explaining why the underground chamber had been designed not only for storage, but also as a potential hiding place during raids or searches by hostile forces. "Look at this entry," Martha said as she read from one of Ezekiel's journals. He writes about hiding 12 people in this chamber for 3 days while slave hunters searched the ranch buildings. The ventilation system and supplies were designed to sustain people who might need to remain hidden for extended periods while hostile forces were in the area. The scope of Ezekiel's Underground Railroad activities was far larger than Jerry had ever imagined, involving coordination with networks that extended from Missouri to Canada and included some of the most prominent abolitionists and political figures of the period who were working to end slavery throughout the United States. Historical revelations: the decision to share the discovery of Ezekiel Stockton's Underground Railroad materials with historical authorities required Jerry and Martha to work with experts who could properly evaluate and preserve the documents while also determining their significance within the broader context of Missouri's role in the pre-Civil War anti-slavery movement and the complex political struggles that had characterized the territorial period. Dr. Samuel Richardson, a historian from the University of Missouri who specialized in studying the Underground Railroad and pre-Civil War Missouri history, arrived at the Whispering Pines Ranch within days of Jerry's initial contact and immediately recognized the extraordinary significance of the materials that had been preserved in the hidden chamber beneath the barn. "Mr. Stockton," Dr. Richardson said after spending several hours examining the documents and artifacts, "what you've discovered represents one of the most complete and well-preserved collections of Underground Railroad materials that has ever been found in Missouri. Your great-grandfather's records provide details about operations that historians have been trying to understand for decades. The authentication process that Dr. Richardson conducted confirmed that the documents were genuine and that they provided previously unknown information about the scope and organization of Underground Railroad activities in central Missouri, including details about routes, safe houses, and participants that had never been documented in surviving historical records. From the period, the maps that Ezekiel had created showed a network of Underground Railroad stations and routes that extended throughout Missouri and into Kansas, Iowa, and Illinois, revealing coordination between anti-slavery activists that was far more extensive and sophisticated than historians had previously understood based on fragmentary evidence from other sources. These maps show that your great-grandfather was coordinating with Underground Railroad conductors as far away as Chicago and Detroit, Dr. Richardson explained. The level of organization and communication that these documents reveal indicates that the Missouri Underground Railroad was much more than a collection of individual efforts. It was a coordinated network that moved hundreds of people to freedom. The preservation of the materials required careful handling and specialized storage techniques to prevent deterioration that could damage documents and artifacts that had survived in excellent condition due to the protection provided by a carefully designed underground chamber and the waterproof containers he had used to store the most important papers. The chemical analysis of the papers and inks confirmed their age and authenticity, while also providing information about the materials and techniques that had been available to people like Ezekiel, who needed to create and preserve documents under difficult and dangerous circumstances, when discovery could result in imprisonment or death. But the historical significance of the discovery extended beyond the materials themselves to include the building and property where they had been found. As the Whispering Pines Ranch represented one of the few Underground Railroad sites that remained in private hands and could potentially be preserved as a historical landmark for future generations. Mr. Stockton, said state historian Margaret Sullivan during her visit to examine the discovery, your ranch represents a unique opportunity to preserve and interpret an actual Underground Railroad station where visitors could learn about this important period in American history while seeing the actual places where these activities occurred. The media attention that followed the announcement of the discovery brought visitors from throughout Missouri and neighboring states who wanted to learn about the Underground Railroad activities that had taken place at the Whispering Pines Ranch, and to see the hidden chamber where Ezekiel Stockton had stored the materials that documented his anti-slavery work. The archaeological investigation that followed the initial discovery revealed additional evidence of Underground Railroad activities at the ranch, including hidden compartments in other buildings, concealed routes between structures, and burial sites that contained personal effects left by freedom seekers who had passed through the property during their journeys to free states. The educational programs that Jerry and Martha developed in cooperation with historians and educators provided opportunities for students and the general public to learn about the Underground Railroad while examining authentic documents and artifacts that illustrated the courage and dedication of the people who had risked everything to help enslaved people escape to freedom. Students need to understand that the Underground Railroad wasn't just something they read about in textbooks, Martha told visiting school groups. It involved real people, like Jerry's great-grandfather, who made dangerous decisions to help others. And it happened in places like this ranch where they can actually see where history was made. The research that grew from the discovery revealed that Ezekiel Stockton had been one of the most active and effective Underground Railroad conductors in Missouri, personally assisting more than 300 enslaved people in their escape to freedom while also coordinating with networks that helped thousands of others throughout the region reach safety in free states and Canada. The genealogical research that resulted from the historical investigation enabled Jerry and Martha to contact descendants of some of the people who had been helped by Ezekiel's Underground Railroad activities, creating connections between families whose histories had been intertwined during the pre-Civil War period, but who had lost contact over the intervening decades. Mr. Stockton, said James Washington, whose great-great-grandfather had been assisted by Ezekiel Stockton in 1847. My family has told stories for generations about the white rancher in Missouri who helped our ancestor escape from slavery, but we never knew his name or where his ranch was located. Finding this connection to our family history means more than I can express. The reunions that took place between descendants of Ezekiel Stockton and descendants of the people he had helped created emotional connections that demonstrated the lasting impact of the Underground Railroad activities and the courage of people who had risked everything to help others find freedom and build new lives in safety. A legacy revealed the transformation of the Whispering Pines Ranch from a working cattle operation into a nationally recognized historical site dedicated to preserving and interpreting Underground Railroad history. Represented not only the fulfillment of Jerry and Martha Stockton's commitment to honoring Ezekiel's legacy, but also the creation of an educational resource that would inspire understanding of the courage and sacrifice required to fight injustice in all its forms. The designation of the ranch as a National Historic Landmark provided official recognition of its significance in American history, while also ensuring that the property would be preserved for future generations who could learn about the Underground Railroad by visiting the actual places where these activities had taken place and seeing the evidence of the risks that participants had taken. The Whispering Pines Ranch represents one of the most complete and well-documented Underground Railroad sites in the United States, said National Park Service historian Dr. Patricia Morrison during the landmark designation ceremony. The preservation of Ezekiel Stockton's materials and the interpretation of his activities provide visitors with an authentic understanding of how the Underground Railroad operated and what it meant for the people who participated in it. The educational programs that grew from the ranch's historical designation included partnerships with schools throughout Missouri and neighboring states, providing students with opportunities to learn about the Underground Railroad through hand experiences that brought history to life in ways that traditional classroom instruction could not achieve. The living history demonstrations that Jerry and Martha developed with historical interpreters allowed visitors to experience aspects of Underground Railroad operations, including the challenges of traveling secretly, the dangers faced by conductors and freedom seekers, and the careful planning required to move people safely through hostile territory where discovery could mean death. When students experience what it was like to hide in the underground chamber or follow the routes that freedom seekers used to travel through Missouri, they develop a much deeper understanding of the courage and determination that the Underground Railroad required. Martha explained to educators who brought their classes to visit the ranch. The research center that was established at the ranch became a resource for historians, genealogists, and educators who were studying the Underground Railroad and pre-Civil War Missouri history, providing access to Ezekiel's documents and artifacts, while also supporting ongoing research into the networks and individuals who had participated in anti-slavery activities. The digital archive that was created from Ezekiel's documents made the materials available to researchers throughout the world, while preserving the originals from damage that could result from excessive handling, ensuring that future generations would be able to study these important historical materials. The annual Underground Railroad conference that the ranch hosted brought together historians, descendants of participants, and educators from throughout the United States to share research, discuss preservation efforts, and plan educational programs that would ensure that the lessons of the Underground Railroad continued to be relevant for contemporary audiences. The Underground Railroad teaches us that ordinary people can make extraordinary differences when they have the courage to stand up for what's right, said keynote speaker Dr. Sarah Mitchell during one of the annual conferences. Ezekiel Stockton's example demonstrates that individual actions, when guided by moral conviction, can contribute to movements that change the course of history. The marriage between Jerry and Martha had been strengthened by their shared commitment to preserving and sharing Ezekiel's legacy, creating a partnership that combined their love for the land with their dedication to education and historical preservation that honored both their families' past and their responsibility to future generations. Martha and I have learned that we're not just inheriting property and buildings, Jerry said during an interview about their historical preservation work. We're inheriting responsibility for preserving stories and lessons that can inspire people to understand what courage and compassion look like in practice. The children that Jerry and Martha raised at the ranch grew up understanding both the importance of their family's historical legacy and their own responsibility to continue the work of education and social justice that had characterized their great-great-grandfather's life and that remained relevant in addressing contemporary forms of injustice. Their son Michael became a civil rights lawyer who worked to address contemporary forms of injustice, while their daughter Sarah became a teacher who specialized in using historical sites and artifacts to help students understand the connections between past and present struggles for human rights and social justice. Great-great-grandfather Ezekiel taught us through his example that we have obligations to help people who are being treated unfairly, Michael said during a speech at a civil rights conference. The Underground Railroad was about more than helping enslaved people escape. It was about people recognizing that they couldn't be truly free while others were enslaved. The international recognition that the ranch received included visits from historians and educators from other countries who were studying similar resistance movements and networks that had helped people escape from various forms of oppression throughout world history, creating opportunities for comparative research and education. The 25th anniversary of the discovery of Ezekiel's hidden chamber brought together hundreds of people whose lives had been touched by the ranch's educational programs, including students who had visited as children and had been inspired to pursue careers in education, law, and social justice as a result of their experiences learning about the Underground Railroad. The time capsule that Jerry and Martha buried during the anniversary celebration included letters from visitors, students, and descendants of Underground Railroad participants who had been moved by their experiences at the ranch and wanted to preserve their thoughts for future generations who would continue the work of education and social justice. Years ago, we were just trying to repair flood damage in our barn, Jerry said during his speech at the anniversary celebration. What we discovered was that we had been living above one of the most important pieces of American history. And that discovery changed not only our understanding of our family, but also our understanding of our responsibility to preserve and share the lessons that history teaches. The Ezekiel Stockton Underground Railroad Museum continued to serve as a center for education and inspiration long after Jerry and Martha's retirement from active management, with their children and grandchildren carrying forward the work of preserving and interpreting the history that had been discovered beneath the barn floor and ensuring that future generations would understand the importance of individual courage in the struggle for justice. If this incredible story about discovering hidden history and a family legacy of courage moved your heart, smash that like button and subscribe for more amazing true stories about ordinary people who created extraordinary change. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that individual courage can contribute to movements that change history. Comment below and tell us about a family story or local history that surprised you. Ring that notification bell so you never miss our latest inspiring stories. Remember, we all inherit responsibility for preserving stories and lessons that can inspire people to understand what courage and compassion look like in practice.